Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something really fascinating. We're opening up a comprehensive diplomatic dossier on one of the most complex, deep-seated geopolitical rivalries in modern history, the 70-year conflict between Iran and the United States. We're going to step back, put on the hat of a neutral international diplomat, and look at the cold, hard facts. Think of this as a documentary-style timeline, tracing exactly how two nations went from being incredibly close strategic allies to adversaries locked in this enduring, decades-long shadow war. Real quick, here's how our dossier is structured today. We'll start with the roots of the rivalry, move into the revolution and rupture, explore the rise of proxy warfare, tackle the nuclear standoff, and finally, look at a potential path forward. All right, let's dive into Chapter 1, Roots of the Rivalry, and where that original mistrust actually began. So our timeline kicks off in the mid-20th century. Now, this was an incredibly volatile time when domestic economics and massive Cold War strategies just smashed together in the Middle East. Picture the early 1950s. You have a democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, and he makes a huge, bold move to nationalize Iran's oil industry. Now, this directly threatened established British economic interests. Britain didn't love that, obviously, so they asked the U.S. for help. And that leads us to 1953, which is an absolutely massive historical turning point. The CIA, along with British intelligence, actually orchestrated a coup to remove Mossadegh, and they reinstated Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as a pro-Western monarch. Now, from a purely diplomatic perspective, the U.S. looked at this and saw a big Cold War victory. But for many Iranians, they saw it as a blatant, unforgivable violation of their own sovereignty. And that leads to this stark duality in the post-1953 era. On paper, for about 2 decades, the United States saw Iran as literally one of its absolute closest regional allies. We're talking massive military aid, economic support, even peaceful nuclear assistance. But underneath all that shiny alliance, a really deep resentment was brewing. You see, the Shah's government was becoming more and more authoritarian. He relied heavily on a secret police force to severely suppress political freedoms and crack down on dissent from everyday Iranian citizens and religious leaders. Which brings us right into Section 2, Revolution and Rupture, the breaking point. All that mounting domestic unrest we just talked about, well, it finally boiled over into a total paradigm shift, the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Ayatollah Khomeini overthrows the Shah and sets up an Islamic republic with a fiercely anti-Western stance. And the rupture happens incredibly fast. It hits a horrifying peak with a U.S. Embassy hostage crisis, where students took 52 American diplomats hostage and held them for 444 days. That event profoundly humiliated the U.S. on the global stage, and by 1980, it resulted in a complete, total breakdown of diplomatic relations and the rollout of permanent economic sanctions. But you have to ask, what actually turned a terrible political crisis into a permanent, decades-long rupture? Well, it comes down to core ideological differences. It's an identity clash. On one side, the U.S. is out there promoting a system rooted in democracy and liberal values. On the exact opposite side, Iran is operating under an Islamic political system that is literally anchored by its strong anti-Western identity. These aren't just policy disagreements, they are fundamentally opposing worldviews, and they are still driving the decision-making of both nations today. Moving right along to Section 3, the rise of proxy warfare as the shadow war expands. As we roll into the 1980s, the brutal Iran-Iraq war breaks out, and the whole confrontation shifts from direct diplomacy to this shadowy, indirect conflict. And the immense human tragedy of all this tension can honestly be summed up by a single number: 290. During the war, the U.S. was actually supporting Iraq with intelligence and aid. The tension hit a devastating, awful peak in 1988, when a U.S. naval vessel mistakenly shot down an Iranian commercial passenger plane. Tragically, all 290 people on board were killed. And, as you might imagine, that one horrific mistake hardened anti-American sentiment within Iran for generations to come. Now, to really grasp the next big phase of our documentary timeline, we have to talk about proxy warfare. Think of it like outsourcing the fight. It's a strategy where opposing powers fund and support regional allies or armed groups to do the fighting on their behalf. So instead of two massive nations engaging in a direct, catastrophic battlefield war, they just outsource their geopolitical rivalry to proxy groups. Sure, it reduces the risk of World War III, but it drastically, painfully prolongs instability across the entire Middle East. And the profound impacts of this proxy strategy, they are literally visible everywhere you look in the region. Iran starts supporting groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and competing for dominance in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Fast forward to today, and we're seeing the modern versions of this: attacks on commercial oil tankers and relentless drone strikes. So, as international observers, we sit back and watch two wildly different narratives playing out simultaneously. You've got the US accusing Iran of being a massive sponsor of global terrorism, while Iran firmly asserts it's simply supporting legitimate resistance movements against Western and Israeli influence. Next up is Section 4, the nuclear standoff, going from cyber war to a highly tense standoff. Stepping into the 21st century, the whole conflict morphs again. This time, it intensely centers around international suspicion over Iran's nuclear ambitions. And wow, the past 20 years have been a roller coaster. Let's look at the timeline. In 2002, the US labels Iran part of the axis of evil. That leads to crazy covert actions like the Stuxnet cyber attack in the mid-2000s that literally messed with Iranian nuclear facilities. Then, 2015 brings a massive, landmark diplomatic breakthrough, the JCPOA deal, treating sanction relief for strict nuclear limits. But then, plot twist, the US suddenly withdraws in 2018, slapping severe sanctions right back on. By 2020, following a US drone strike that took out Iranian General Soleimani and Iran firing back with missile attacks, both nations were hovering just inches away from direct military escalation. Which brings us right to where we are now. As this quote perfectly captures, the conflict today really resembles a modern version of a Cold War. It's all about strategic competition, intense economic pressure, and vying for regional influence. Both sides are currently locked in this incredibly tense, high-stakes standoff. They are deeply, profoundly suspicious of each other's motives, yet both are carefully, meticulously, trying to avoid stepping over the line into a full-scale war. Finally, let's look at Section 5, a path forward and potential diplomatic solutions. Look, despite 70 years of profound, almost ingrained historical mistrust, international diplomats still point to a logical framework that could actually stabilize the region. Step 1. Revive a nuclear agreement that offers real, tangible economic incentives in exchange for clear, verifiable limits. Step 2 is building a comprehensive Middle Eastern regional security framework just to get a handle on those proxy conflicts we talked about. Step 3 is crucial, establishing direct, formal diplomatic engagements so accidental escalations don't spiral out of control. And finally, Step 4, implementing basic confidence-building measures, think along the lines of prisoner exchanges to gradually piece together a baseline of trust. For the global community watching, these aren't just nice-to-haves. These steps are absolutely vital to preventing a massive regional explosion that could literally upend the entire global economy. So I want to leave you with this final, lingering thought to ponder as we close this explainer. Can decades of profound, deeply rooted historical mistrust ever truly be erased through diplomacy? Or is this shadow war just destined to be a permanent, unbreakable fixture of global geopolitics? Knowing what we now know from this extensive diplomatic dossier, do you think mutual understanding is actually practically achievable? Or are we just going to see this strategic rivalry continue indefinitely? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating timeline with me today. And as always, keep questioning the world around you.